Hello, and a very, very warm welcome to Legendary Leaders, the podcast. My name is Cathleen O'Sullivan, and I'm the host of this show. And together with a wide range of legendary leaders and experts in the field of self-leadership and leadership of others, we are going to explore concepts and ideas that show you how you can move past potential fears, negative self-talk, constant self-doubts, and much, much more. And all of that in order to encourage you to become a legendary leader yourself. And that with more natural impact, influence, and real genuine inspiration. We want you to be you in capital letters, to be at your best far more often, and to show up in the most authentic way that feels almost easy. So are you ready for it? Well, welcome once again to Legendary Leaders, the podcast. Hello and welcome, Nyree. It's so lovely to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
My gut tells me this is going to be quite what's the word you just used? Animated conversation, quite a passionate conversation. And hopefully for all the listeners, a conversation that makes all of you and all of us think differently around different topics of work and life. So before we delve into this innovative, fresh and new thinking, it would be great if the listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Who are you? Big question. And what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
My instinct was just to say I'm a mum first. So I'm a mum of a 6-year-old. And I also co-founded a business called Jack and Grace, which does all sorts of communications stuff. So we pride ourselves on being really strategic. So our job is to go in, figure out what is the communications challenge here, and then figure out, okay, what's the thing that we need to do in response to that? And that might be, we try not to get too excited about the kind of tactics about like what the social post could say or what the video should be until we've done that early thinking about what do we actually need to say to who and what do we need them to change. The business is 5 years old. So I had my little girl, Grace, and then set up the business about a year after that.
In the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, great. Really, really solid timing. We didn't know, we were like merrily planning away, getting really excited, my co-founder and I, thinking about this business. And there were the sort of a very early whispers. Do you remember those days? There were like little whispers of strange things happening and the news, there was more news. But we didn't know what was to come. So we forged on. And just as we launched, lockdown started. So that was spectacular timing on our part.
And yet you're in a position to say, we have been on the market for 5 years. So it's not like it stopped you from launching or it delayed it. You went for it. So what's your secret to success?
As awful as so much of the pandemic was, for us in that very formative stage of launching a business, it was helpful. Not in every way, but in terms of leveling the playing field, because we were just getting started. We didn't have the kind of shiny office in place that lots of kind of, I guess, competitors had in place. And suddenly none of that mattered. Everybody had small children running past your video call and, everyone was operating from their home. So actually at the very beginning, it sort of leveled things out weirdly. And it was, a really tough time doing all of the juggling. What was your pandemic? What were you doing were you working through the pandemic?
I gave birth to a human being.
Of course. That's quite a big thing. Yeah.
That was quite a big thing. Yeah, I remember in February, we learned that I always say we were pregnant. I was pregnant, full stop. And he was born in November. So that was I don't want to say it was great to be in the pandemic, but it was to some extent helpful, as you've just mentioned. We were in our little bubble, even though health support was trickier, seeing midwives like only virtually or even just having phone calls with them. And the other part was I went into my own business September, October before. So I was on the market basically for 6 months or 7 months when the pandemic hit. And I don't know if the universe was on my side, but I early on made sure I'm able to deliver a lot virtually and with different tools in the market. And that was for me a massive lifesaver, because I could be pregnant and do some great work. I could be a mom and do work. And there was like an interesting alignment of life and work throughout these entire years. And that brings advantages and disadvantages, but it worked out, because I've been on the market now since 2019, the business. So I found it rather helpful as well.
Yeah, definitely minuses, but also definitely some interesting plus points. Yeah.
I would love to introduce you even more to the listeners, in particular with regards to, motherhood and aligning that with a business, with the work. However, before we do so, you already started to talk about Jack and Grace. And I am really curious about how you came about to found this specific business.
I had worked in communications and like behavior change roles. I mean, 20 years ago, I was doing some really interesting work to literally test out methods of behavior change. How can you encourage people to live more sustainably? Like, what are the points in life when they're most open to change? Which changes might they make? What types of people make which changes? And I was kind of on the doorstep doing that. And then I moved into more of the research side, like looking at the data and analysing that, and then into the communication side. And I just got absolutely hooked on this behaviour change and how you do it, and what works, what doesn't, what the rest of the context has to be to make everything work. And so I continued on from that, not knocking on doorsteps anymore, but kind of in those roles where I could work in communications, but with a behaviour change side of things. Fascinated by, just what makes people tick. And then I worked for a range of organisations inside the organisation doing this kind of work, and then moving over to agencies where I got to work with lots of different brands and businesses and charities. And then I think I having a child, suddenly all of the sort of business rules that I'd been following, like really diligently, really trying so hard to follow the rules, kind of got pregnant, had this baby that just changes your life, as you know, and continued trying really hard to follow all of the rules of work, and like trying very, very hard. And it just got less and less possible to meet those expectations. And then I thought, there's got to be a better way. Like, there are so many, once I started noticing, and I think this taps into the sort of behavior change side of things, but once I'd started noticing all of these unwritten rules and expectations, once I started seeing them, I then was able to question them. And I hadn't really done that before, but it was definitely having a baby that made me, kind of gave me that trigger point, just because it was just impossible to, do what I'd done before.
And your journey to parenthood was quite a challenging one, wasn't it? And you are one of those women who I admire speaks really openly about it. So if you look at your overall journey, all the challenges you've had, tell us a little bit more about the challenges, because a lot of the listeners won't know about them, but also how you work through these tough times.
It has been a sort of tough journey. I am open to talk, because I've had 2 miscarriages, and I'm really open about. I really want to talk about them. They're not nice to talk about, but I think I learned so much about. Well, do you know? I mean, I've got to age. What I realise is I've got to age 40 in my life, and I know so little about how my body works and what some of this stuff would feel like physically, but also the mental side. And I found the actual physical, just yell if this is too much information at any point, but the kind of physical side of having a miscarriage was quite a shock to me, like how how difficult it was to kind of bear. And then the sort of process of coming back from it and realizing that it's not a sort of linear recovery, and there are lots of kind of forks in the road where you just don't feel right. Or perhaps you thought, I thought for quite a long time I was coping really well, and looking back I realized it just really, really wasn't. I don't know if you've had similar sort of experiences, or because you've had quite a journey that, as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it wasn't easy to become pregnant as well. Loads of attempts. And for me, it was the biggest challenge in this process was that I felt really incomplete as a woman. Not because I wasn't a mother. I made actually in my life quite a late decision and choice to become a mother. I was one of those who said for many, many years, oh no, I lived my life of freedom. It's fine. It's not a part of who I am to be a mom. And at some point it changed pretty quickly. But I felt incomplete because it was like something is wrong with me that I'm not able to conceive. And it had some real mental implications for me. And that's just the beauty of it. Often, people say when you don't really put pressure onto things, they happen. And I'm a real believer in that, because I still remember how we went to an IVF clinic and had my eggs measured and whatnot, realizing, okay, I don't produce enough eggs, for example. And that was just one of the reasons why we weren't able to conceive. And we made the decision to go for IVF, which many, many people will know is all but easy. And then the pandemic hit. Oh, no, it wasn't a pandemic that it hit, but we had an appointment that would have fallen into the pandemic, which we didn't know about at this stage, obviously. And at some point, knowing it's still quite a few months down the line, you're like, okay, letting go. And I actually spent time doing acupuncture, for example, and finding space and time to chill out, basically. And that's when it happened. And we were like, how did that now happen? And it was just natural. And that was beautiful. And then obviously all the IVF clinics in the UK closed and were repurposed for other purposes. And that was the light at the end of the tunnel for us.
Amazing. So you were going through the IVF process, and then you actually conceived naturally in the end when you kind of in between. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
We hadn't even started the IVF process at this point of time, just made the appointment and had all the measurements taken that needed to be taken. And that's it. Wow. And then it happened. But what strikes me is that I hear and read news regularly nowadays about, we should consider giving parents, not just moms, time to grieve after a miscarriage and give them leave. And I'm like, yes. And why is this only happening now? What still needs to happen with regards to raising awareness, supporting others, having these open conversations? What needs to happen? And I would love to hear your view with regards to approaching this topic individually as well, because the experiences may vary vastly.
Yes.
Curious about your view.
You've hit the nail on the head. I think it is that there isn't one rule, it's not one size fits all. Everybody's experience, my experience is very different from somebody else's. I think it is just giving people the time and space to recover and whatever that looks like. So for us, I think having been through this, we like to challenge rules in the way that we sort of set up the business. So we're really comfortable talking about miscarriage, but also menopause, periods, all of that stuff. We think it should be, it's such a big part of, 50% of the population's, 51% I think we are as women, our lives. Why is it still so taboo? And it affects everybody. Certainly men talking about how miscarriages affected them as well is great. It's a good thing. It affects everybody. So we've put a policy in place, but it's very much around, yes, there's a certain amount of kind of paid support and making sure that that's generous enough so that so our policy supports the person who has had the miscarriage, but also if you're a family member to that person, because that's one of the things that really struck me is actually how much support I needed to draw on to kind of get through it. So if you're, for example, I don't know, if you're a grandma or something and you need some paid time off to support someone, then that would also be covered by the policy, or if you were a partner. But also just an acknowledgement that everybody's experience will be different and we will support whatever that looks like. Maybe it's some coaching or maybe it's extra time off, and just being really flexible about it. And the same with the menopause, which I haven't yet. I don't think I'm not quite there yet. I feel like it's coming for me. But I have colleagues who are definitely experiencing various stages of that. And it's the same thing. Like there's no single experience, but having the flexibility around work so that you can do your best work, but you also have this stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. What's the support you needed and wanted in those moments as well?
My business partner was amazing. She just sort of said, we've got this, just do what you need to do. And that is really what I needed, permission to stop, which, you should be able to give yourself permission. But certainly in that moment, I found myself unable to. And it was really helpful to have somebody else saying, no, you have permission to kind of switch off and just focus on what you need. And then the actual miscarriage process, the kind of, few days or so of the physical symptoms, it was all consuming for me. It was a lot to kind of go through in terms of the physical side. And the sort of, I don't want to say, I hate how people say pain, because actually it's your body doing something completely natural that it's, you could think of exercise as painful but it's not. It does. Yeah, there's definitely strong sensations that you have to kind of work through, and it's very intense. So there was kind of that bit to do, and I needed my mum around, I needed my husband around, and then afterwards it was just time. I needed rest, and I needed kind of gently to ease back into work. But it was definitely a more grueling process than I had anticipated. Mm-hmm. I just hadn't really thought about it. So I think the more leaders we have that have been through experiences like this and can talk about them, the better, because it will inform better workplaces in my view.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think those dialogues are really important with people affected by the situation. Because if I look at myself now again, right? Literally having trained myself to be an achiever, ambitious, to get things done. And now there was a miscarriage, and I would say, let's just push through it. Get on with it would be something I would tell myself, right? And I think it's important that we have people around us who also say, hey, I'm not sure what's going on, but I notice something is different. I'm here to talk if you need me, and to kind of help us open our eyes for what's really going on, because it can be so easy to suppress those emotions.
Yes, and to feel like you have to put a mask on. It's always struck me as really weird how there's this sort of one of the unwritten rules is that you don't talk about pregnancy until you've kind of got beyond that 3-month marker. And yet, if you're going to have a miscarriage, the data shows more miscarriages happen in those first 3 months, which is when you really need support. So wouldn't it be better to rewrite that rule so that you can talk about it from the beginning when you might need support? Because often those first 3 months of pregnancy are really tough and challenging, and when you need support. So I would really like it. Certainly one of the things we do in our organisation is, if people are comfortable, create that space where they can talk about this stuff, either, trying to get pregnant and that journey, or in the early stages of pregnancy, because it's a sort of double whammy. If you haven't told anybody that you're pregnant because it's too early, in inverted commas, and then you have a miscarriage, you've kind of got two things to share. And I think if we can be more open about this stuff, I think it's easier for colleagues to support you in whatever way you sort of need that support.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it sounds like, and you've shared with me obviously a few stories prior to our conversation today, as if Jack and Grace is a real pioneer in testing out and living and breathing to a large extent new ways of working. And not new ways of working in terms of remote and hybrid working and open plan offices and whatnot, value-based ways of working. And you've already shared a few examples. What are some other examples that you have experimented with and that have become a success? And perhaps some that haven't become a success yet?
Or ever, some of them. We did exactly right. So we set up the company as an experiment, really, to test out some of the stuff that we'd always been told in previous workplaces that wouldn't be possible. So, for example, that you have to kind of work with the horrible clients, whether that is kind of literally mean people or stuff that you don't agree with, whether it's kind of casino, gambling, trying to get people to spend the money on that, or alcohol or smoking or whatever it is. You have to work for the horrible clients in order to fund the work you really want to do for nice people doing great stuff in the world. But you can't just do the good work. You have to work with the horrible people in order to fund so we when we started out, it was just my co-founder and I, with our laptops, and it's quite risk-free at that stage. But we were like, let's just test that out and see if that's true. And then the other big experiment was, how far can we push? Like, how many rules of work can we chuck out the window? All the stuff that we'd always been told, yeah, you can't run a business like that. We really wanted to run it as an experiment. And we were very clear that some of the stuff, because rules are great, there's nothing wrong with rules. They can be really helpful. But I think if you just accept the rules without sort of unpicking them or questioning them or checking whether they're still good rules, you've sort of just inherited them from the generation before, then they might not be good rules. So we wanted to experiment, and we've been really honest with our team that some of the stuff, because it is an experiment, some of the stuff we've tried won't work, and we should all call that out and just reshape the rule. So one of the things that didn't work was we tried the unlimited holidays, which I think a lot of organizations have tried to varying degrees of success, and I think for some places it has worked. But our observation with sort of removing specified holiday allowance was that people take less holiday. The net result is people take less holiday because they don't want to let their colleagues down, or they don't want to be seen to be taking too much. And actually, holidays really, like time off, is really important. So we reversed that rule. So we have a sort of, we've given everybody, I guess, an allowance, a target to aim for. Like, you should be having this much time off. And we also, the one thing within that we did flip was bank holiday days. So you don't have to take them on the bank holiday. If that doesn't work for you, just take that day whenever. You can work the bank holiday if you want to, and make use of it as and when you actually want to. But some of the other stuff we've tried has worked. So salary transparency, making sure we advertise the salary on all job descriptions. Just because if you're secret about salary, and we're not brilliant at talking about money, I don't think, always as a sort of general population. But if you can be more open about it, it helps weed out inequality. Otherwise, the sort of inequalities just get entrenched in, and people join from outside the organisation and end up earning more than somebody else doing the same role. So that's something that has worked really well, although I would like to push that further. So at the moment, we agreed with our team that what everyone felt comfortable with was publishing salaries on job descriptions and publishing the salary bands internally. But I would like to go to more of a sort of a system that you have in Scandinavia, where you literally say what you earn. But we're on a journey with that one. So it's good to be. It's got to always be at the kind of pace that people are comfortable with, and just pushing them on.
Sorry, let's stay with this point for a moment. And I know you have so many other experiments to share with us. What do you believe are the benefits of being so transparent? Maybe you have some research from Scandinavia in terms of those benefits as well, so that we can make other people think about it from a different perspective as well.
Yes, such a good question. Because I have spoken to lots of business leaders about this, and there is some definite digging in of heels that actually the salary secrecy is working for them. They wouldn't frame it in exactly those words, but there's a definite real caution around it. And the fears seem to be around competing for talent, wanting to be able to negotiate on salaries and kind of get talent in, especially if it's kind of quite competitive. And I think also it can be very unsettling if you have been for many, many years paying people different amounts for the same job, and then you go through this process and that all comes out. That can be very disruptive. But I would say that the benefits and the research on this is very much emerging. It's quite kind of new, the studies that are being done on this. But in terms of recruitment and retention, and particularly that retention point, because if someone finds out they're being paid less to do the same job, what happens is they leave. If not immediately, the resentment builds and they leave. And even if the salaries are leveled when the realization is made, the sort of dawning that you've worked for many years on a lesser salary and nobody thought to kind of up it builds that resentment, and people end up leaving. Yeah. For me, it's as you can tell, the sort of moral side of it. It is wrong in my view, and it helps. It's a catalyst for other inequality in my view. Women, and it affects women and parents particularly, and sort of fuels the depression of their pay. But actually, there's a real business benefit, because if you can foster that more open culture, you will hang on to your people. And it's so expensive recruiting people, and finding good people is so expensive. And retention for a business like ours, where we're a people business. That's what we're selling is people's talent. To hang on to those people and to retain that knowledge and expertise in the business is really valuable. Did you used to work in a corporate background? Did you come from yes? And what was the situation there? Was it open or was it?
No, I was in a position where I had access to salary data, okay, but often not the ones of colleagues of mine. And there was always a sort of secrecy. So even when we said, can we publish the bands? Can we share that? There was either a lack of transparent information and clear information as well. So you would get a certain band the one day for a certain job role, and another day you get a different kind of band, and you're like, where does that all come from? What's the research behind this? So first of all, quality of data was a real challenge in some of those organizations. And the second piece was, man, was it easy to get access to the information? Because people talk about their salaries. They do. And it creates, as you said, so much resentment. Yeah. And then nowadays, before you make a decision about a role, you will check what is the average pay for these kind of roles in the market. And you come more prepared in interview processes or two interview processes. And so therefore, not being transparent about it, not talking about it openly, from my perspective, is a real disadvantage. Because that kind of implies, and I know I'm being very black and white thinking here. I know different organizations are able to handle it differently as well. So there are good organizations out there. But you kind of treat people in this moment like we have the power of knowledge. You don't. Yeah. Assuming they have no clue. And we can access literally all sorts of information nowadays through AI, different portals that share salary, benchmarks, and so on. So don't underestimate the people you're working with.
Yes, very good point. Yeah, stuff is naturally more transparent because there's more data out there. I think people still are reticent to talk about their salaries. Maybe you'll do it a little bit, but I know people who think it's actually illegal to say what your salary is to a colleague, and it's not. Just for the record, it's definitely not. And even if you had there really aren't many company policies on that. Maybe the kind of odd few, but I think we should all talk about our salaries more. It's my challenge.
Yeah. Whereby I have to say that I had moments in the past where I really struggled to talk about my salary as well, especially when it went into the higher kind of bracket, right? It was more a sense of, and I think it comes from how I've been raised, that I didn't feel shame, but I was like, I don't want to show off, or it feels uncomfortable. And I found it hard. And I still find it, by the way, really hard when I see people talking about how to make this 6 or 7 figure income. And I've made it after 6 months in my business. I don't know. It's definitely, my values feel compromised in this moment.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it comes back to that. It is a measure of success in society, but I think it's also an overweighted measure. You know, there are, your previous episode was kind of focusing on this, but defining success by each, in, you know, what you actually want from your life. And I think we sort of over-index in terms of financial success, whether you're talking about a business's success or sort of individual success. We over-index that. So it feels like it's almost a really, if you were to reveal it, it's like revealing your worth. And actually we're worth so much more than our paychecks.
That, and what I would also add to it is you could then literally dismantle those numbers and really look into what does success not only mean, but what does it really look like? Because often when you run your own business, you know that yourself, you have 12 team members. They have to get a good salary to feel and keep motivated. You have fixed costs, you have you have other costs. And then you need to check, okay, what's the bottom line like? Do I have enough cash flow to invest again? And you have completely different struggles. And quite often, even when you hit the big numbers, it doesn't mean that the bottom line is working out well. Often it takes a bit of time to get to that point where you say, all right, now I can breathe. I feel like there's enough cash flow in the bank to actually feel like, you know, we can grow, we can move forward, we have a bit of a backup. And so therefore, it is also important, if we talk about just sharing big numbers, to be transparent about that and what it means and give a realistic perspective. I know that takes us slightly away from the salary conversation now, but, you know, I just encourage everyone else to look more deeply into such statements as well.
Yes, here. Quite agree.
Now, I saw, Nyree, that you had, I don't know if it is a list next to you with all of the things that you are experimenting with, that you have introduced in your business. And I interrupted you when you talked about transparency of salaries. What else are all the lovely things you do differently?
I did have to write a list. I really did. Because I think you forget, don't you? And it becomes your own normal. But I know from having conversations with people that some of the stuff we do is quite weird. One of the ones that always gets brows furrowed is we offer all jobs part-time as standard. So usually you'd have to apply for a job, it would be full-time, and then you'd have to put in a part-time or flexible working request. So we've just sort of flipped the script on that. So you can work full-time for us, but you just need to put in a request. And actually all of the roles we assume will be part-time roles. And that can look like, you know, it could look like 2 days a week. It could look like 3 days. I do 4 days a week. And people really struggle to, how can you make that stack up? How can you, isn't that too much of a jigsaw puzzle? How do you know how you're going to resource the work properly? And we just come at it completely differently, in that, to me, the more ridiculous thing is to have this random rule. I mean, who decided that full-time work, like jobs, have to fit in to 37.5 hours a week? That's what, that, to me, that number is so random, or 40 hours. Who decided? Who is that person who decided that? When did they decide it? When did that become the rule? To me, it's a much more sensible option to access more talent by saying, look, we'll build the job around you. Tell us what you want to work, and we'll figure it out. I mean, it's hard figuring that kind of stuff out anyway. So you may as well make sure you're getting the best talent because you are offering kind of flexible options. So that's one of the things we do. But I think people think we're slightly mad for doing that, but it works. We're 5 years in now. The experiment is working.
And let's talk about that in a moment, how you know it's working. What are your measures of success? I can imagine that if I applied for a role in your business, that I would be really excited about, oh, we built a job around you. Like, oh, finally. And then if I'm not used to this approach, I'm like, well, how do I do that? So how did it practically work? And how, again, I used the word dialogue here today quite often, but I assume you have to step into a dialogue with the people and figure it out somehow. So what does it look like?
Yes, I'm nodding so much as you're talking. It is a real culture shock and a shift. And you're right, even if you think, great, what a relief, I can fit my kind of other responsibilities and life stuff around work, actually doing it. And we've got, I always think of the sort of the expectations of work and the sort of the rules that we've been talking about. We've breathed them in and they're like air. So we just stop noticing that they are even rules. And so unpicking a lifetime of being sort of conditioned in that way is quite tiring for people when they first join. And one of our very first questions when we're going through a recruitment process, we really try and put people off because it isn't for everybody. For the people it works really well for, they thrive. But for people, if you're very used to a lot of structure, or you feel very guilty. I mean, we have, some people don't have this problem, by the way, but a lot of people, if they were, say, announcing to the team, right, I'm out of action for a couple of hours because I'm going to do some exercise, you won't be able to get hold of me. And it's the middle of the working day. Or even, it's 3, I've got to go pick my child up. Actually, people saying that stuff out loud, because we've had this lifetime of conditioning, I think people can find quite difficult. And maybe they haven't been able to say, like, it hasn't been okay to say that stuff in previous places that they've worked. We have to go through a real process with people. Everybody gets a copy of a Brené Brown book when they arrive with us. And we do really try and support people so that it is very much a conversation, and stuff any change is uncomfortable. We're in the business of behaviour change, but when you're going through it, it can be harder to recognise, but it can be very uncomfortable. We just have to guide people through it, and they have to figure out their own way of making the sort of radical flexibility work for them. And like we were talking about with miscarriage and menopause, it's different for everybody. It's different for each person. But I think if you come at it from the principle of we are all adults and we can all do this and we can figure it out together, then you will have the right sort of environment to be able to get through it. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I keep saying I agree with you completely. I also mentioned to you last time that I watched a clip on Instagram by an influencer who basically walked the escalators at one of London's tube stations. And YouTube station, why not? And he was chatting while walking upstairs. Loads of people around him, everybody pushing one another, being in a rush. And he's like, how mad is that? It's literally after 5:30. Everyone is rushing home or to the pub or wherever they go to. But everyone, because that's what our working hours dictate. And then public transport benefits from that because now they can raise peak prices and we just feed the system. Does it make sense? It doesn't. It's nonsense. It's absurd. And yet, who is pausing and standing still to challenge that system and to say, how can we change things? No, we have environments where certain organizations call their people back into the offices full time because they don't trust, they want to control you, they have misunderstood what leadership means. And you notice, I've seen this a few weeks ago. You noticed that really stuck with me. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So when you see announcements like these, you all come back to the office now. think about that? What's your view? What would you like to see differently in leadership in particular?
There are so many of those around, and certainly in our world of kind of communications and PR at the moment, there are some really big cases. Honestly, when I see that stuff, it does not make sense. It doesn't make business sense to my way of thinking. I honestly don't understand what's going on there. And I really think people quite often are trying to solve a different problem. If you don't trust your team, that's a different problem. Maybe try fixing that problem rather than just insisting. I think there is a bit of some people who get to be in charge of organizations. They kind of just like to see all of their humans like out in front of them. Mm-hmm. And unless they can see them in the same room as them, they don't think they're doing their job, or there's definitely something around that. And I don't understand that way of thinking at all. If you don't trust your people, that's a different problem. Fix that problem. Don't insist that they come back, because you end up stripping out talent. There's this, I don't know, it also never makes sense to me when people say we've got the very best talent, in the whole of the country. And yet you look and they're insisting that their people are in central London for 8:30 every working day. How can that possibly add up to the very, very best, the absolute best talent happens to also be those people who can make it into central London for 8:30 or 9 everywhere? How that doesn't make any sense. The best talent is spread all over, and the best talent has quite often been pushed out of organizations because they can't be in central London every day. So I just think it makes much more business sense to find the very best people by offering them a way that they can do their very best work. I can't remember the question now because I'm just off on a rant, as you can tell.
And it was a very open question with regards to what thoughts and perspectives came up for you. So
anger.
You answered that question 100%. And I'd also say, there might be a lot of people who you may call a talent who want to be in the office and they love it and they really thrive. And there are loads of people who like to have a hybrid version, and there are others who will be, I don't know, in Australia or in China or whatnot and really do the greatest work there. And you're setting yourself limitations of actually working with the best people from this massive source of this globe. Yeah, and I find it really challenging. I also was reflecting again on my corporate days. And I know I am just one out of many, and this is only my experience. But my experience was that I had the biggest quality conversations when I wasn't in the office. When I was traveling, perhaps, and I was at an airport and I thought, oh, you know what? Let's call employee X and have a chat. And that was a really beautiful, deeper chat. Or when I was at home and we just, had conversations where there was a bit of peace and quiet around. Because when I was in the office, I was literally running from one meeting, from one conversation to the others, while not really seeing my own team. And the feedback I got quite often was, man, you seem to be really stressed. I just see you running around. It didn't give me
up steps in the office.
Got a lot of steps in, indeed.
Yeah.
Right? So again, what I learned about my leadership is also paying attention to my nonverbal communication, which I have to do on a regular basis, but B, intentionally then building in moments of real connection and presence, i.e. instead of just running around from meeting to meeting, saying perhaps no to a few meetings and saying yes to a coffee, walk and talk with one of my own team members. And these are just those small moments that you can build in. But coming back to the actual forcing people to come back to the office, does it really work to have this plank or this blanket that you throw over an entire population that this is now the way forward?
Yeah. I would strongly say it doesn't work. And your point about I think that businesses need to think about what different people need to get the best out of them. And that might be quite often when we talk about flexible working, people think that just means working from home. And of course it doesn't. It's probably for most people, it's a mixture I really like the opportunity to get together with my team. And some of our team are real extroverts and they thrive. You can see their little solar panels out, kind of absorbing all this energy. They need that. So it's figuring out what different people need and tailoring it as far as you can to make it work. But yeah, it seems very old-fashioned to me to have one rule that you then apply, and it's usually the rule that fits the boss best. Like, let's be honest, it's the rule that fits them best. They just assume that's how everybody needs to work, which I don't think is it's not really a good business reason.
No, not going to say I agree again here. You said it works for us. And I said to you, I want to know the measures of success and how you know it works for you as an organization, as a team. So how do you know?
We have a triple bottom line. So we measure success based on profit. Profit's great. Everyone loves profit. Nothing wrong with profit. But also we value profit equally with people and planet. So that's what the triple bottom line is. And we are a certified B Corp, and it kind of taps into some of the measures that B Corp look at to give you the certification to be a sort of ethical organization. But definitely for us, profit is an enabler of business. It's really important. It allows you to do lots of things, like survive as a company for one thing. But I think so often, we were saying earlier, kind of money's over-indexed as a sort of success metric. And I think when you kind of get out and about, go to networking events and people say, how's business? It's so transparently what they mean is how's the money side of things, like how's the profit? And actually for us, profit is really important, but not at the expense of and in tune with people and planet. So, and we have to remind ourselves of this, quite often, particularly, I think a lot of businesses in our sector went through quite a rough patch. There was the time after Liz Truss and nobody wanted to spend, did they? It was all very interesting times. And I think people were waiting for an election and kind of new government and no one was spending. And everybody in our world was kind of saying, like, it's a struggle, like the work's just not there. And so we were people were so hyper-focused on kind of the money side. And it was so, when we sort of shared stuff with other leaders in our industry, we had to remind ourselves, hang on, we're not just measuring on profit here. That's one of our three. And actually our people are really happy. Like we've looked into it, we've done some research and people are really thriving. People don't leave. We've got really solid retention. We get loads of people wanting to work for us, where other companies are having to kind of pay to kind of recruit people. And then on the planet side, we're meeting our objectives to kind of reduce and increase our team's knowledge of how we're going to reduce our carbon footprint. Actually, when you look at that triple bottom line, and at different points, some become more pressing. And that's just, for a certain period of time, people might become more pressing. But at the end of the year, when you review where are we, you have to look at all three in the round. And we do have to genuinely, I think it's so ingrained in it. I do think of the rules as like microplastics, like they're just, we've inhaled them and they're living in us now. And we have to actively remind ourselves, oh yeah, hang on, right, okay, the profit's not amazing, but actually we're not just measuring ourselves on this. And my co-founder and I and our board as well we have to all kind of remind each other, because you're so trained to think of success as profit alone.
Now the question that I keep asking myself with regards to Check and Grace is, how do you take everybody with you on this path? Because I said to you earlier on, before we started the recording here of this conversation, I said, even this one conversation we had prior to today really made me think about my 3 Ps and how I contribute or how I'm not contributing to them. And when I think about these kind of things, it triggers some ongoing reflection and then small steps that I might take more consciously. Now you slowly but surely hired people into your business, and you took them, I'm saying it in a very fluffy way, onto your journey. How do you help them become part of this profit, people, planet DNA? Really live and breathe it, and perhaps call you out as well.
Yes, that's the dream. When people start calling you out for stuff, I think you've done your job well as a leader. Like that they're able to do that. Yeah, it is a journey, and people come at it from very different points. We have some people in the team who I would say are very sort of traditional. They have only ever been in businesses doing stuff one way, and some of this stuff feels crazy. And they use sometimes people level the word nice at us, like, clearly you're doing business wrong, like you are too nice. How can being too nice be bad? But it is sometimes in this sort of context, it's seen as a weakness, I think. And we're very, very open, like we're very clear on what we're doing as a business, the clients that we're willing to work with. We always say clients choose us, but we also choose them. So I think we try and do that, warts and all. We might not be the right place for everybody, but we're so set on doing things this way and really testing out whether this can be done, that we're very, very open, and we do try and put people off. People come in, join us with kind of eyes wide open, but we have those mechanisms in place to make sure we've got an amazing board. So we had a board in place before we even had any clients, because we wanted the challenge, but also the scrutiny. So we've made sure that we've got those sort of literal sounding boards in place to help guide us. And that is really useful, because your profit, I always think of, and this has come from one of our board members, as your sort of raft or your boat. And you've got to make sure that's sort of shored up and in place. Otherwise, everything, if you've got holes in your boat, you're going to sink. But actually, the people in your environment that are on the boat, you have to have that right as well. So actually, they are all equally important. So we do bring people with us, but I think we're just really warts and all about it. And we try and do a bit of putting people off. And we have worked so hard to build the culture, to be really open and to make sure people can challenge and, feel empowered to do stuff. We wouldn't sort of hire somebody who wasn't, it's not that we're all learning and nobody's perfect, but if there's somebody with fundamentally different beliefs as to how this is a choice that we're going on, then I think it would be really difficult if they weren't open-minded to kind of change. And I think that's fair. Like we're never going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay.
No, and that's good.
It's good.
Yeah. So everybody has a place in this world to offer their value based on, their clients, their niche, and what it is.
Yeah.
Now, the next question is a bit twofold based on what you just mentioned. How to literally choose those candidates and figure out as to whether, they are culturally and values aligned with you or not. So that's the first part. And the same applies to your clients, because I find it astonishing how you, I would say, research your potential clients, those leads first, before you make a decision upon who you work with. So give us some insights into both parts of the selection process.
Okay. Well, for people, in terms of our team, we are a values-led business, and we have a kind of core values that we live by, and they are very active values. So we've plotted out what each one kind of means. So when we're recruiting, we can ask the right questions of people, so that we're very clear. Every company has the same values, don't they? It's like we innovate. We care, but there's not the meaning. What does that actually mean, and what does that behaviour look like? So we've done the work to figure out. We do actually have we care as a value, but we have put in, okay, what does that actually mean in terms of colleagues? What does that mean in terms of the work and clients? So I think doing that work to really figure out, and we did this when, I mean, we're still relatively small, but we did that before we even had people. And I can't take any credit for this. This is my co-founder, Laura. This is her passion. But we did the kind of thinking and the work to plot all that out. And the same with clients. So we do have this, it's not quite science, but it's a more scientific way of figuring out who we want to work with, because we've got a framework in place and a series of questions that we run through. So we do lots of research to figure out. And what we're really looking for is demonstrable positive impact on people and planet. So that's what we're really looking for in all those questions. And then we allow a little bit of space. So we have a target in place that we'll only work with. We want 70% of our turnover to come from clients who are demonstrably making a positive impact. But we do allow some space to work with organisations. Maybe they're a startup or they're new or they're testing something where they don't necessarily have the evidence base to show the impact yet, but their values are a match and they're heading in the right direction. So we have a bit of kind of scope to work with organisations like that as well. But we had to put a framework on it because it's really hard. And I'm a wuss. It's really hard to say no to people, especially I'll give you an example, but I won't put names to it. So a very well-known big insurance company came to us and they were really excited because they had an employee engagement project, and it was really lovely what they were trying to do. But our gut instinct was, but ultimately it's an insurance company. There's no kind of demonstrable positive impact on people and planet. It's kind of fueling, driving, and it just didn't fit with our, and no judgment on anyone else. This is just how we wanted to do it. But saying no when you haven't got that backed up by any kind of data or a framework or a proper process is really hard. So in the end, we just said we're really, really busy, and we would not want to take on a piece of work we couldn't do well, which is true. But now we've got our sort of framework in place. We're able to say, look, we've run it through the system, and actually we can tell we're just not a match because we've got this process in place. So I do think processes are helpful if you're a bit of a wuss and you'd rather not say no to people.
And maybe I'm a bit too naive here, right? But I would wonder how it might help this organization to know the exact reasons why we're not a match, in order to help them to focus more on their values-based leadership or message, which can be so difficult in that industry, but it's not impossible, and that there might still be some work to do.
We had this whole existential debate, because I've worked in lots of organisations where, you're trying to be values-led and you've got the triple bottom line in place. And if you'd have asked me, say 10 years ago, I think the landscape was so different, and we didn't know as much about climate change as we do now. We didn't understand the kind of impact that it's having. I think 10 years ago, that for me would have been a really valid position. But I think at this point in time, we're a decade on from that. I think you've got to put your money where your mouth is. And if you believe really strongly in this stuff, you would have done it by now. You would be on the journey. And if we can't see this sort of, if you're doing a sort of discrete project, which is really nice, but the rest of everything, your kind of fundamental business model is doing damage, I think for us, and again, I know I sound really preachy, but genuinely no judgment. But for us, we really wanted to do this experiment and figure out, can we use, because communications is a superpower, like done well, it's a superpower. And we really want to be on the side of organizations making a positive impact in the world. There's the organizations who aren't often have, so their pockets can be very deep. And we wanted to make sure that actually, if we're using comms as a power, we're doing it for good.
And I admire that. I think more of check and graces are needed in this world as well. And I think even through your decision-making process, you can have a major impact on organizations if you work or are in contact with people who listen, obviously, and who are willing to take the feedback on board. Yeah. That's obviously a key requirement here.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. We did, you say we can have a big impact. We ban, so we don't buy from Amazon. That's one of our things. And it's like a sort of statement as to the sorts of partners and suppliers that we want to work with. But Jeff Bezos has not been on the phone yet to cry about the the impact that's having on his organization. Yeah, I have to say, don't think you've noticed.
No, it's the same like with many other examples, people quitting certain social media channels. And I'm really torn with regards to that because
Are you on Twitter? X? Are you on it at the moment? No.
Okay. And I won't. But I even had this conversation with myself about Meta. I'm like, I literally do everything through WhatsApp with my clients, that's the main communication channel, Instagram. And I'm not saying, no, I will never change. However, certain things need to be in place first. I would have to do some research on alternatives and as to whether they are truly better. And it continues with Apple products and continues with Microsoft products. And we could go further and further. And it's a real dilemma. And at the same time, I'm happy that I am thinking about these questions. Because what I'm noticing in this world at the moment, when I have conversations with colleagues of mine, for example, the oblivious kind of ignorance sometimes. And I know there's a lot of judgment in what I'm saying, not really listening in, tuning in, having kind of some challenging conversations with self in terms of how can we have a teeny tiny impact? How can we make some changes? Is something that I'm missing.
Yes. I think all you can do is be awake to what's going on, and you can't fix it all. All you can do is, and that's why, the term woke comes in, like it's almost become an insult. But to me, all it means is you're awake. You're awake and you're listening and you're watching and you're understanding and joining up the dots. And I would much rather be awake in this world than asleep.
I want to say that is a great way to close this session, but I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet. What's next for you?
I've got enough on my plate at the moment. Trying to get through the day. Yeah, no. More of the same. So we're really excited about the next kind of 5 years, and I think we're at a point where we're feeling more confident now. We've tried and tested this stuff, and although it might sound crazy to some people, we're building the evidence base, like it's working. And I would love to kind of join up the behavior change skills we've got and looking at all the experimental stuff we've done to help other organizations maybe embed more flexible working, look at what a bendier organization could look like for them. But yeah, more of the same. Like it's really fun. And I think you have to be, I'm looking at each stage of parenting brings its own delights and challenges, but trying to be very sort of kind that actually there are only so many working hours in the day, and that is okay. And I have to also juggle making my yesterday, so it's World Book Day yesterday, as we're this week with 48 hours notice, I had to make a scene from a book using potatoes, which was just another, like, why is this my life? I don't know. Hopefully less of making potato scenes, but more of the same. It's great. It's really fun and it's really challenging.
The playfulness in the potato action is giving me loads of energy right away. I know in this moment it feels like, oh no, come on. And then at the same time, if you shift your thinking in this moment and think about how could this actually be fun, that takes us out of the here and now and the doing mode, and gives us also a bit of perspective and perhaps fresh thinking, makes all of the difference.
Are you going to leave this and go and do some potato? Is that what you're saying? You're going to leave now and go and do a bit of potato modelling? I can see it.
Maybe that, or maybe something else.
Yeah.
In around 2 hours' time, I can tell you more.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, I want people obviously to connect with you, to learn more about Jack and Grace, but perhaps about your journey as well. So where can people find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best place to check us out, and we tend to be there being quite gobby about all the issues that we've been talking about the triple bottom line and flexible working, and so it can be entertaining and educational.
I would highly recommend to check that out. And if you have any questions, if you want any support with communication, behavioral change, venting, whatever it is, then get in touch. We are here for you. Our contact details will be in the show notes as always. And just let us know what you took away from this conversation. What small or big light bulb moments were we able to create? What don't you agree with, perhaps, as well? We'd love to know that as well. And with that, I'm going to say, Nyree, it's been so lovely talking to you, being inspired by you again. Keep doing this amazing work. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening in. Can't wait to speak to you all again. And until then, take good care of yourself. Bye-bye. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Legendary Leaders podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, then remember to subscribe to the show either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or my website, which is the go-to platform, CathleenO'Sullivan.com. I would also love to hear from you to discover what topics you'd like to hear more about, what topics really resonated with you, and how you are enjoying the show in general. So please do leave your review on Apple Podcasts as well. It would mean the world to us. Thank you so much, and speak to you again next time. Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.